Tyler.
And I'm Brian. And on this edition, we want to talk to you about the importance of standards, specifically the IEC 613-00335. Tyler, a lot of times when we're talking to people doing the inspection and cleaning process, they start seeing the circles. Can you tell us what the circles are in the software, and what am I looking at?
Yeah, sure. Well, the 61300 standard is something that's been around for a number of years now, established by a lot of credible companies throughout the industry. We both know people and have worked with people who have sat on that standard and all the work that went into that. And basically, the logic was that they wanted to find some way to establish a level playing field for identifying how clean is clean enough. And, there's all sorts of opinions and things that they tried out to, what criteria to use. And where they ended up landing makes a lot of common sense, both from an evaluation standpoint and a practical implementation standpoint, is they just put a series of concentric circles, kind of like a bullseye in an archery, or a strike zone, or if you're Canadian, a curling rink, right?
Sure.
Or whatever you guys call that up in Canada. But anyhow, it's an evaluation that the closer you are to the target in the center, which is where the core of the fiber is, where the light is transmitted, the more essential it is to keep that clean. And so whereas the zone A, or in the core, has to be very pristine and free of defects, you get out to zone B, and now there's a certain count of defects, there's a certain size of defects that are allowable, and of course then the location of them. Then you get into zone C, which is the actual adhesive zone. We can get into that later. And then zone D, they call the contact zone. And so the farther away you get, the different criteria that you have for the amount of defects that are allowable. Now, I got to hand it to the IEC. When they first developed this, it was really primarily established for manufacturers of cable assemblies and such to have a good benchmark to evaluate their criteria when it was leaving their facilities. But it's really become adopted now. We're seeing it in TIA 568 standards, and even,
And you see a lot of other industries actually adopting a lot of the criteria, especially the pass-fail, the amount of defects, whether it's permanent or removable defects, into other standards. Yeah. And then the other thing, too, as see more of the MTs coming on, the IEC addresses that too, right? Different polishes.
Great point. Yeah, and I think that this has been a misnomer in the industry. You might hear some people say, "Well, there is no IEC standard for multi-ferrule connectors." That's not true. There's actually part of the standard actually does call out acceptance criteria for multiple termini ferrules as well.
That's right. Yeah. So the other thing too, Tyler, why is it important to follow the standards? One of the things we get a lot of times is, hey, why don't I just sort of look at it and figure out what I think looks good for me or my company?
Yeah, your criteria is good for you and mine is good for me, but you got to have a level playing field. So we used to see this a lot of times with manufacturers. Something would leave their facility and they would say, well, yeah, it was good enough for us, but then the contractor receives that and they, according to their criteria, oh man, that was garbage. And so then you get into this argument between the manufacturer and the contractor or the end user, and it becomes sort of a my opinion versus yours. Mm-hmm. And so this is why we love standards, right? It gives us a level playing field and a common reference that we can go back to say, this is what we're both trying to adhere to.
Or Tyler, what do you say to the guy, hey, once we plug up our LC connectors into the panel, we're done. I install stuff all the time. Why should I care about the standard?
Well, again, after that, you plug that in, but then what if you ever have to do a move out or change later on?
Or my test leads, right?
Yeah, exactly. We talked about this in previous episodes as well, is that, once you actually perform any tests, if you're not checking your test leads and making sure that those are clean, you're leaving yourself vulnerable for all sorts of other problems in your equipment and your devices under test, your ports.
Yeah. So I think it's great. The IEC 613-0035 is probably the most comprehensive document out there. It addresses everything from best practices all the way to the inspection criteria. It's probably the best written document out there. Would you agree?
I totally agree, and it's really easy to understand. The biggest challenge that we see in it is now how do you evaluate that? And this is where having automated objective pass-fail analysis tools actually are the most beneficial, because I'll pick on Zone B, for example. It may actually say, we're allowing to have a 5 micron particle, or a particle any smaller than 5 micron. But you and I could sit here and stare at the screen of something and say, well, I think that's 4 micron. And you can say, I think that's 6 micron, right?
Absolutely.
So I
was going to say, yeah. And so, stay tuned, because we're going to have another episode where we'll talk about the importance of having an automated software that has the right algorithms, right, to kind of go through and make sure that when you're inspecting that interface, that it actually is measuring correctly, right?
It's objective now, not just our opinions.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm Tyler.
And I'm Brian. Appreciate you watching.